Good morning, Barbara. Good morning, Cindy. Good morning, Nancy. Hey, Lauren. All right. Welcome to Wake the Fuck Up Wednesday. I just came back to Alaska from Hawaii on Monday. Like I had a fucking red eye flight, which I haven't taken one of those in a long ass time. Hey, Mel. And I was like, oh, it's all good. I'll be traveling alone. I won't have a kid or anything. And it fucking sucked. Like people were so grouchy that there was like fights happening in the two rows before me. And I had to like call the flight attendant. And I was like, why is she not noticing this? She was only like 4 rows away. Anyway, I was like, there's kind of an intense conflict happening in these 2 rows. You might want to de-escalate. So anyway, and then I go from 81 degrees and I'm wearing like, usually I change in the Anchorage airport because it's usually colder outside and people like, they see me with flip-flops and my Hawaii stuff. And they're like, you're going to change, right? Because it's really cold. And I'm like, oh, really? Like how cold? 8 degrees. That's what it's been. I think it was even colder, on that day, but I was so sleep deprived. I didn't even check. So anyway, it's like 8 degrees, but it's all good. It's gorgeous with the snow. So that is awesome because I love me some snow. So how are you all doing? It is November. We are heading into the crazy shit, right? If you didn't hear my episode on boundaries during the holidays, check that out, or my Elephant Journal article. If you go to my Instagram profile, there's links for that, but go and check it out because it talks about like how to deal with all the craziness with family and friends and lovers and things during the holidays. Okay. So today is a very common topic that I coach on. I just want to tell you, okay? Because it is called, and this is a 2-part series, how to not lose yourself in a relationship. And this is so common. I mean, I have so many amazing, powerful, confident women come to me and go, once I'm in a relationship, it just kind of all goes out the door, right? Like, being out of a relationship, we are going to yoga 5 times a week and we're hiking with girlfriends on the weekend and we're doing our hobbies like painting or knitting or playing music or whatever. We have dinner parties. And then often people in a relationship, once they're in a relationship, they skip yoga because their partner is available and they want to hang out with them. They may genuinely miss them, but then they start compromising their self-care and their preferences for this, right? A lot of people cancel things with girlfriends, right? I've often seen articles that talk about like, like Elephant Journal had one that just came out about someone saying like, my girlfriend ghosted me when she was in a relationship. Personally, I've never had a friend ghost me because they were in a relationship, but we see that happens, right? All of a sudden they're less available. Some of that's natural. A lot of it comes from relationship anxiety. So I want to dive into that today. This is a 2-part series because there's a lot to unpack here. So the first part of it is sort of foundational, and I want to talk about attachment theory. We're going to talk about patriarchy and how that contributes to relationship anxiety. Okay. And even if you're in a long-term relationship right now and feel like, this might not be a thing for you, well, check it out because you might have some ways that it's sneaking in subtly, or you can notice it in your friends in your community and maybe you can help them out. All right. So as you all might know, I received my postdoctorate in psychiatric mental health nursing from Johns Hopkins University. And I noticed that, I had been taught about attachment theory in my undergraduate psychology program at UCSC, and then just sort of forgot about it, right? And I mean, obviously it's been in my mind and I can see it happening, but it wasn't like a primary thing. But then I read this book, Anxious in Love, and I was like, oh, right, attachment theory. And in my Hopkins program, we revisited that. And I was like, wow, we can really see this a lot in our culture where our attachment patterns from childhood show up in our adult relationships, right? So I'm going to lay the foundation for that. And then also how we add to that being socialized in the patriarchal culture. And we add to that, traumatic, toxic, long-term relationships or parenting styles. And it makes sense, right? So I'm just going to preface this with, if you have relationship anxiety, there's nothing wrong with you. Totally normal. I'm going to tell you why right now. Okay. So you go, because a lot of us think like, oh, I'm just insecure. I'm just like a jealous type, right? And we just kind of write it off like this is how we're born or something. But what's happening is our brain's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. First of all, all relationship anxiety is rooted in caring about what other people think about us, right? So it's like, if I don't bail on the yoga class for that person, they're going to think I don't love them, or they might think I'm not attentive enough, etc. Right? From an evolutionary perspective, this was important because people socialize as women. So I know this is very heteronormative in the way I'm talking about it. So I'm not talking about how people identify. I'm talking about how they're socialized. Okay. So socialized as women, even from an evolutionary perspective, it was life or death if people didn't like you and ostracized you from the tribe, because you didn't have resources to protect you from apex predators, or to gather necessary resources like food, water, and shelter. So it was life-threatening when people didn't like you back then. So we were programmed to be sensitive and to care about what other people think about us. But the problem is that in this day and age, that type of reality is not as powerful, if at all, right? So we take this baseline anxiety and we add to it all of our drama, right? And it keeps us from our self-care and achieving our goals, okay? So we have, let me see, do I want to talk about it? Let me kind of talk about the patriarchal context first, okay? So we are in a patriarchal culture, which privileges men and is a social system that tells women that they're not good enough. And we hear it from our family, the broader culture, movies, advertisements, and we're taught that men are like this and women are like this when socialized as such. Again, this is not how you identify, okay? And we're told, women should marry and be nice and not seem too smart to their partner. I mean, what fucking mixed message. I remember my mom saying like, be smart, it'll get you out of the hood, but don't let your partners know about it because men get really threatened by that, right? And we're also taught to make men and other people feel good about themselves at our expense often, right? We're told to be kind and patient no matter how you're feeling, and to put everyone else first. And we're taught to evaluate our own self-worth based on what other people think of us. And anxiety in relationships, like I said, is often rooted in worrying about what the other person thinks of us, okay? So let's review the basics of attachment theory. There is, it's basically like how we communicate our needs and how they're responded to sort of establish this attachment pattern, right? So it's kind of like the baby cries, well, and then when the caregiver leaves the room, they come back in and the baby calms down. And then it also is influenced by how attentive the caregiver is. Like, oh, like, are my feelings validated? Do they hear me cry and respond fairly effectively? Do they understand my cries and respond to them, right? So our experience as a child and how reliable our caregivers are at meeting it, and also from a depth psychology perspective, our core wound and the core wound that we are predisposed to have, in that philosophy, all impact our attachment style. Okay. And we act this out in our adult relationships. And so also, if we have long-term adult relationships that are unhealthy for us, this will also impact our attachment style, right? And so we have secure attachment, anxious attachment, and avoidant attachment. Secure attachment, they're all good. They do exist, my friends, these people. You tend to notice them. Like they talk and you meet them and you're like, fuck, they must have had really good parents. Right? But we're still going to be happy for them, y'all. Okay. We're going to be happy for those people with like really great upbringings that fostered a very secure attachment style, right? They're comfortable with intimacy. They can maintain independence. They're not codependent. They're not isolated. But the anxious attachment styles are preoccupied with fears of being abandoned or rejected, right? Because it was like the response was not consistent when they needed to feel connected and intimate, right? And maybe an anxious attachment style will worry about their partner changing their mind about them, losing interest, or their partner leaving them, right? Manifests as jealousy and anxiety. And we tend to respond to these uncomfortable feelings by trying to reestablish connection in a way that fucking scares people. Because we're like, hi, how are you? Did you get my last text? Hey, I think we should talk. Is everything okay? Are you sure nothing's going on? And it's this kind of really grasping, but really what's happening is we want to reestablish connection, right? Now, the avoidant type is people that feel uncomfortable with intimacy. And when they feel that way, instead of graspy, they push and they isolate and they withdraw. They ghost you. They don't respond to your texts, right? So, and there's a lot more on that in the pod, so be sure to check it out, okay? But I wanted to point out that we have this patriarchal environment where we're told our worth is based on whether we have a partner or not, and if we're able to keep other people happy or not at our expense. And then when you have an anxious attachment style, right, we grasp and we look and we notice any kind of sign that that person might leave us. And we also filter, right? So all of our relationship experiences go through the filter of our attachment style. So we will be like, so let's say someone texts you, I love you. Someone with a secure attachment style will be like, oh, that is so sweet. Someone with an anxious attachment style will be like, huh, they never say that. I wonder if they're feeling guilty about something. Somebody with an avoidance style will be like, oh, this person is so needy. Why do they keep telling me they love them? Right? Same event, different filters. Okay. So this can help us because we are aware of this pattern, right? We can see that we have this tendency to filter experiences in a certain way because of the patriarchal upbringing and the thoughts that we were told to have, that other people's feelings matter more than us, that our self-worth is dependent on whether we have a committed partner, right? And our actions to reestablish intimacy or to maintain intimacy, right? All of those actions tend to be part of losing yourself in a relationship. I hear so many women talking about stopping things that they love, not going to events and whatnot, because their partner will miss them or whatever, right? And it's like, and what's the underlying fear there, right? What's the underlying fear? Is it that, well, and if they miss me, they might hook up with someone else, or if I'm gone, they'll think I don't care about them as much. So there's so much underlying those behaviors that we try to do to calm the anxiety and to reestablish the connection, calm the fear, calm the anxiety, that lead to us losing ourselves in a relationship. So this is what I've seen be a big underlying part of why people drop everything when they're in a relationship. It's this anxious attachment style. It's this patriarchal context of you better hold on to that shit. I mean, I remember when I got divorced, when I told my mom I was getting divorced from my first husband, she was like terrified. She thought I was going to like become homeless and die. She started crying. I'm so worried about you. How are you going to make it? And I was like, because I have like 2 master's degrees and like a shit ton of skills, and I'm going to be just fine. Right. But my mom was older. She was a child during World War II. She experienced the Depression. Like for her, like relationships saved her. Right. And we grow up in that context in our culture as well. Right. So I'm trying to like, the podcast is very long, so I'm trying to filter out the essentials for y'all. So keep in mind this filter that we put everything through, right? So this is like, how do we address this? This is where mindfulness and awareness comes in, because awareness precedes change. So we start to notice, oh, I'm going to pick a fight, or I'm going to act out right now. Like I'm about to do that. Why? What are the thoughts that I'm having? Like, for example, when I was first dating my husband, if he didn't respond to my texts as quickly as I thought he should, or even if he said some kind of offhand comment, like a criticism or something, I don't know, like just some random thing where I was like, that was a little off. I would sometimes, I noticed I would like pick a fight. Like, what do you mean by that? Why did you say that? And so, the anxious anxiety for me was like, rah, 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 grasping, acting out, right? And I remember when I decided, this guy really loves you. Why are you acting out this way? And I was like, next time I feel that, I'm just going to watch and see what happens. I'm not going to say anything. And I tell you, it was almost painful to not say anything, because I was like, I want to do something about this. So he would say something like, oh, you shouldn't have done this. You should have done this. Right. And I would have been like, well, why? Because why? I'm anxious. Like I want to prove, no, I'm worthy. Right. This was totally logical that I did this because I'm worthy of your love. And instead I was like, I'm just going to watch this. And I think, oh, he doesn't love me. And then I'd wait. And then like within minutes sometimes, or hours, or later that day, he'd be like, I love you so much. I'm so glad that you're here. And I'm like, damn, good thing I didn't say anything. So we can become aware of this kind of filter that we experience the world through, and be a little bit more intentional about the thoughts we're going to have, right? And we can say, oh, this is my anxious attachment brain here, choosing to interpret what this person said as a threat or as a deep criticism, right? And I want to emphasize that an important antidote is to remember that we are 100% lovable and worthy as we are right now, even though we're taught so differently in our culture. So that is the long-term thing we need to work on, right? It's about our relationship to ourselves and about establishing our inherent worthiness and lovability, knowing that, establishing that belief in our mind, because it's already true, whether you believe it or not. And this doesn't mean that we don't ever sacrifice for people that we love, but the motivation for the sacrifice is different. When it's healthy, right? It's from a joy of doing it, not a fear-based thing of what the other person might think, or a fear of making them uncomfortable, a fear of disappointing them, or a fear of them leaving us, right? The motivation is different. Can you see the difference? Yeah. One is driven by love and feels good, and the other is driven by fear and anxiety and is fucking exhausting, because trust me, I've been there. Now, in the pod, I talk about how people with anxious attachments tend to be attracted to people with avoidant attachment styles. And that's a shitstorm, right? You got one person who grasps and the other person who runs away. But we do this. Listen to the pod to learn a little bit more about that, okay? But a lot of people might think, okay, so the first step then, when I notice this, is to try to change my thoughts about it and be like, oh, okay, so I need to like reframe this. No. The first step is to have some self-compassion. Because what we tend to do is we notice we do this and we shame ourselves and all this shit, right? But really what we need to do is be like, I'm sorry, Anna. It's hard to see the world in this way, but it makes sense because of how you were raised and the context and your past relationships and all of that. This is hard. What do you need right now? That's where we start. Not shaming ourselves for, oh, there I go again. I gave up all my priorities, ghosted my girlfriends and all that shit, right? Self-compassion, then the thought work, okay? So just to recap, the patriarchal context where we're told our worth is based on whether we can attract a partner and have them commit to us and hold on to that, and that our self-worth and lovability is only based on how other people think of us. That's the context, right? And then Also, our attachment styles. Many of us have anxious attachment styles, and that contributes to this relationship anxiety. Now, in part 2, I'm going to go into more tools that you can use about how to not lose yourself. But for now, I want you to remain curious, okay? So I want you to go listen to the pod tomorrow, and I want you to notice where this jumps into your experience of your relationships, and not just with dating and not just with like intimate partners, although that's where it tends to be most intense, but also with friendships, family encounters, sibling like stress, right? Like, oh, does mom or dad love so-and-so more, and all of that, right? Then, so once you're aware, awareness precedes change, self-compassion, okay? And then we can start with the thought work but we're going to go more into tools next week. Okay. All right, my loves. So get out there, be nice to yourselves, notice what attachment style you might have, and just start becoming aware of how it shows up in your life, and don't judge yourself for it. Okay. And a lot of y'all been messaging me because you saw the Adventure Mastermind pictures. If you want to get on for spring of next year, go to adventuremastermind.com and get on the wait list. Adventuremastermind.com. Get on the wait list, and you'll be the first to know when registration opens. Okay. And for those of you that aren't traveling right now and stuff and don't want to do adventure retreats, head over to joinfreedomschool.com. Okay. Because we are working on this kind of shit all the time. Right? Yes, all the people in Freedom School that are on there are like, yes, I was just coached on that last week. Okay, loves. Well, you take care. All right. And I will see you next week. You're welcome, Melinda. Yes. Bye, loves.